This is a poster on how to make a great presentation. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to go through it. So in your next presentation, you can use this same formula. I've been studying the best communicators for the last 3 years, and I've literally just copied their speeches to create this. And now you can copy what I copied. If you want this one, there is a link below. You can get it completely for free. Put your email in and I will send you it across. Let's get into it. First of all, you need to understand the purpose of speaking. Why do people speak in the first place? Because most people don't understand what holds their audience together. And that's the first step where they go wrong. You know when you're at school, in primary school, and you had your little book to write all your notes in, but on some days you do arts and craft. You'd get your red scissors or your blue scissors, and if you're a lefty, you'd have these weird yellow and green ones, and you'd cut these bits of paper out. And then you'd get your glue, your Pritt stick, to glue it on. You see that glue? That made the connection from the paper to the book. And you need to find the glue that creates the connection with your audience. Because that is the rule with speaking. Connection is the priority to any speech. The root to any speech is connection. That is the first thing. And in this video, I'm either going to say speech or presentation. They mean the same thing. And the way you figure out what your glue is by asking yourself this question. What unites the audience together? What is the reason they are all putting their bums on seats? They all must have a similarity. There's a theme there. What is it? And if you don't know what it is, find out before you start planning your speech. Because if you plan a speech for the wrong audience, even if it's a 10 out of 10, that speech will look like a 1 out of 10. Because it doesn't fit. Imagine you doing a speech on how to be better at running marathons, but you turn up and your audience end up being 80 years of age, all using Zimmer frames or wheelchairs. How do you think your speech would fit then? Not good. And that's why it's so important to understand what unites the audience together before you even start, because that will dictate the language that you use, the stories that you use, which in essence will affect how you connect. And like I said earlier, connection is the root to any speech. That is the priority. Without connection, you will get nowhere, which is why you need to answer the question, what unites the audience together? And once you understand that, that is when you can move on to the next step. Now the next bit, which we will go through on the poster, if you haven't got it, link below, it's free. Now figuring out your purpose, because most people don't even know what they want out of the speech. Quite a lot of people go into meetings and they don't even know what they want out of the meeting. They're just doing the meeting for the sake of the meeting. But really, we need an A point and we need a B point. Let me explain. You know when you go driving, you never get in your car not knowing where you're going, unless you're depressed at 10 o'clock at night, listening to music, just wanting to be in your own thoughts. But you don't, you have a destination, you have a final destination, because if you didn't, you wouldn't know when to make a left turn and you wouldn't know when to make a right turn. You just end up going anywhere. And with your speaking, we can't do that. We need a B point. So in driving, A is where you are, B is where you want to get to. In speaking, A is where you are, and B is what you want out of the speech. And we figure out what B is by answering this question. What do you want the audience to think, feel, or do after listening to you? That is your B point. That is where you want to go. Because once you know the B point, you can then move on to the next step. But if you don't know the final destination, it's going to be very hard to direct the rest of your planning, because that will dictate your language and your stories, just like the purpose of speaking does as well. So you've got to take these two areas into consideration before you start planning the next bit, even though this will probably include your message as well. So once you've got that, we can then start working on this bit right here, the bit in between, the bit that's going to get you to B, that's going to get you to your final destination, the bit that's going to make them think, feel, or do what you want after they listen to you. That's simple. But imagine doing all that and then not remembering your message. That would be awful. Imagine speaking for 10 minutes in a meeting and people walk out the next day asking a question about something that you already said in the meeting, and the reason for that is they can't remember what you said. There was no emotion to it. You know when you meet people and sometimes you remember people's names, but sometimes you don't. Most of the time, the people's names you remember is because you make some sort of attachment to that name. Let's say, oh, James Smith giving me a notification on LinkedIn. But let's say you meet someone and they're called Brad, and you've got a brother called Brad. And because you've got a brother called Brad, you now remember that person's name, not because of them, but because of the emotional attachment you have to your brother, and because of that, you remember them. Or if it's Georgia or Lauren, I will remember all those names because they are my siblings. So if I meet you and your name's Georgia, I will remember your name 100% because of the emotional attachment I have made with that name. And that's what we want to do with our memory device. We want to make an emotional attachment, and we're going to do that with a story. Now, when I say emotional, I don't mean it's upsetting. It doesn't have to be a sad story, but it's a connection. Emotional attachments create connection because people remember feelings. They don't remember facts and figures, which is why you are going to start with your story. And then if you have facts and figures you want to include, you are going to use them after because that will back up your message. But by just using facts and figures, it's very hard to get people to remember what you said. Please don't run out, iPad. Getting back to it, but it's very hard for people to remember what you said because it's not emotional. There's no emotions involved. It could be excitement, it could be happy, it could be curious, it could be disappointment, it could be gutted. Any sort of emotion, people are more likely to remember what you are talking about because they can relate better. And that's the whole thing about speaking. It needs to be relatable. So you want to pick a story that is relatable. Because going back to the name analogy that I used, the reason it's an emotional attachment because I can relate it back to my sister or my brother. Now, they want to be able to relate this story that you talk about to their life, their business, their problems. If they can't relate, you've most likely not answered this question well enough. What unites, oh, I've got the rubber on, let's put the pencil on. What unites the audience together? That's most likely the case. And that is the most important thing. Pick a story that is relatable because relatable will then build the connection, which is the root to all speaking, especially public speaking. But it's all well and good telling a story, but if the message doesn't land, this memory device is pointless because the story's message is too vague. And the way you are going to make sure it's clear, concise, and it's to the point, and the message lands every single time is by having something that I call an impact line. And remember, if you want this poster right next to you as we go through this video, link below, it's free. But an impact line, I got this off my mentor called Craig Valentine. He calls it a foundational phrase. And it's a phrase in your story that is clear and concise. But it's not there to be remembered, it's there to be repeated. It's a 12-word or less phrase that sums up the whole message of the story. And I didn't know how powerful these were until I used it in real time, in real action, not in a public speech, but in normal conversation, in training, teaching at Jiu-Jitsu. Now, Craig's foundational phrase for one of his stories was, "Don't let the good get in the way of the best." And this story is about how he had a 100 grand salary job, but he wanted to be a professional speaker. But he was letting the 100 grand salary job get in the way of his dream. And he let it get in the way for years on end, until one day he made the plunge into being a professional public speaker. And now he makes a lot more than 100 grand a year. And his phrase for that story was, "Don't let the good get in the way of the best." Now in Jiu-Jitsu, I was rolling with this dude. And at the time, he was smashing me. He was putting all his pressure down, but I was starting to escape and he was still squeezing. And as a few seconds went by, I was getting out of the position. I was pretty much already gone. But instead of this dude readjusting his position to smash me again, he carried on squeezing because he didn't want to let go. And that is what lost him the battle. And after we had a sparring session, after the roll, I go up to him and I go, "Bro, try this next time." And I showed him a new technique. But after the technique, I went, "Don't let the good get in the way of the best." Because he was letting this good position get in the way of a better position where he could have moved to. And he went, oh, that was a sick line. I'll remember that line. And at the time, I didn't really think much of it. Until the week after, and I'm there rolling, and all I hear is, don't let the good get in the way of the best. And I thought, I've said that line before. And I turn around, and it was that same dude. And he was teaching someone a technique. But it wasn't any technique. It was the exact same technique that I was showing him. So the technique was basically the memory device, and the impact line was the same impact line that I used. And that made it clear to me, you need an impact line because they have such a profound effect. Because I wasn't speaking to be remembered there. I thought I was, but really, I was speaking to be repeated. And that foundational phrase that I just used right then, that impact line, is from Craig Valentine. I nicked it, it's his. Don't speak to be remembered, speak to be repeated. These are great impact phrases because it sums up your message in a concise manner. And from that day, I realized if you have no phrase, it doesn't deserve the stage. And that's why impact lines are so important. To sum it up, 12 words or less. It is to summarize your message, and it needs to be repeatable. If it's not repeatable, get rid of it, pick a new one. And if you want to make a killer presentation, make sure you have an impact phrase. If you don't have an impact phrase, get rid of it, pick a new story. And if you want to make sure that everyone will love your presentation, click the link in the bio for this. Moving on to the next bit, and that's the introduction. Because here's the problem. If you have a great memory device, a great story, some great potential for that emotional attachment and that connection, but you lose them in the first minute, you fucked the whole job. Honestly, it's gone. And this would happen so many times to me at Toastmasters. I honestly don't have a clue about some of the stories because their intros were that boring. My eyes were watching, but my mind was all the way over here. And I did not listen to what they had to say because, I'll be honest, their intro was boring. It wasn't engaging. I didn't care. And I see so many meetings where people aren't paying attention. And it's because the intro of the meeting is boring. We have some options that you can include, which are also on this. Actually, they're not on this, but they're on the emails because what this also includes is 11 days of emails going in detail of every section that I'm going through now. You'll get some secret nuances that I've not included in this video. Option number 1, being abnormal. You want to go against the grain, something that stands out. Imagine you're looking at a field and there's 100 sheep, but one of the sheep is purple. Do you think that will stand out? Absolutely. The reason, it's abnormal, it's against the grain, it's not usual. On one of my speeches I did at a retirement fund, they were all 70 to 80 years old, and none of them know what MMA is, not one. None of them know that I was an MMA fighter. I walked out with 2 gloves, I've only got 1, but 2 gloves on my hands. I hadn't even said a word. Looking like, what's that on his hands? They were engaged. The reason they were engaged is because that's not normal. I then picked up the mic and started speaking and going into my introduction. That was against the grain. Option number 2, straight into a story. Get straight into action, where they've got to create a visual image in their brain so they are participating in the speech. That is a great way to get into. That is one of my favorites to get into. Number 3, get them involved. Maybe say a couple lines and then ask a question. Raise your hand if you've ever taken creatine in your life and make sure you address it as you or your. Don't go, how many people here have taken creatine? Speak to one, look to all. That is also in the emails. Bloody hell, that's not in this. Oh, it is now, but whoa, that's some sauce for you there. But there are 3 options that you can do to make your introduction stand out. The most important bit here is engaging. Then after the introduction, you're going to tell them what they're going to get. If they don't already know, tell them what this is going to consist of. And then if you're going to put your credentials in, make sure you put relevant credentials. For example, for me, if I'm doing a speech and it's got nothing to do with MMA, I'm not going to say I was a professional fighter with this many fights. I'm not going to go into it if it's solely about speaking. Just put the credentials which will be applicable to the audience because it's about them and it's not about you. It's not about how many times you've done X, Y, and Z. It's how you can help them. Going back to the... Have I? Oh, no, I've not done it. We'll go into that section now because I totally forgot. But we'll go to the closing and we'll go for the next one. Closing. How to close a speech. Rule number 1, do not finish on a Q&A. A Q&A is dreadful to finish on They're not dreadful to include. But just think of this. You want to be able to control what's in their mind when they leave your presentation, when they leave that door. If you have a Q&A, you could have an awkward audience member. They could make an angry comment. So the last words that you say might not be the best. And that's why you always want to have a close, even if you've got a Q&A. So do a Q&A, then do a close. And also don't do this. Well, yeah, I think that's it, yeah. That's the end of the presentation. That's the last thing they're gonna remember. No, don't do it. Use it to recap what you've already said. Maybe use an impact line, but you wanna leave them with a departing message that for the rest of the day, that keeps ringing in their head, rent-free. Take up some cognitive space in their brain for free. Once they're out that door, it's gonna be in their head rent-free for the rest of the day, the month, the years. Make sure something is in their brain when they depart out that door. And now, I forgot to go through it, my bad. We're gonna do it now. Make it all about that writing is dreadful, but make it all about them. Everything that you do here. What do you want the audience to think, feel, or do after listening? If that does not connect with the audience, it's pointless because you make it about them. Memory device. The story that you pick has to be relatable because you need to make it about them. The facts and figures that you use needs to be for their benefit because you make it about them. The impact line that you use needs to be to their benefit because you make it about them. Everything in your story is always about them. Even your introductions, it's about them. When you're telling them what they're getting out the speech or the presentation, it's about them. People forget you're not speaking for you. That's why when you do a story, if you just say I, it's not gonna work. You know when you meet those people and you're talking about the weekend and you go, oh, I went to the Lake District this weekend. And you're expecting them to go, oh, how was it? Where did you go? Who did you go with? As in, where did you go? As in, which hills did you walk on? And then they go, oh, I've been there. I did this X, Y, and Z in this time. Oh, yeah, I've done that. People always go, me. You don't want to listen to them because it's always about them. Everything that you do after your story is directed to them. You can include a story, you can include an impact line, but if you don't drive the message home after of what you learned from that story or how that story can benefit them, it doesn't matter. People care about 3 things, but only if you answer the last question. They'll care about what you did, how you did it, but if they copy the same approach, would it work for them? The reason they care about those 3 things is because they believe they will benefit from it. But if they know they won't benefit from it at all, they won't care in the first place. So after your speech, after your presentation, look back, see, will it benefit them? Will the approach? That's why you need to big up the approach and not you as an individual. Big up the lesson that you've learned, which might benefit them, their business, or something in their life, even their family. And my iPad is on 1%, so I think that is enough of the iPad work. But make sure it's all about them. Check the link below for this poster. It is double-sided as well. And alongside that, you will get 11 emails over 11 days going in more detail about making great presentations. And YouTube is a very smart individual, which means they probably already know. If you don't listen to this video or watch this video, this poster probably won't even work.